Okay, so hello everyone. My name's Caprice Thorson. I am joined by Jerry Marzinsky, and we are both Mace Energy Method practitioners. But what we're going to be speaking about today is something highly practical, and that is the fact that we are in a spiritual war that continues to intensify. It does not exist in the realm of space, matter, and time. And since most people have been miseducated about the nature of demonic entities, they don't know about this and they don't know how to protect themselves. So, welcome, Jerry. And I think,
Glad to
people
be
can
on.
look at the past video to see your background, which has been an amazing, and 50 years working with, and I guess you can just explain very shortly, how you got here. And I guess the thing that I wanted to start with is I think that when I look back on my life, because I'm now in my 50s, and I spent the majority of my life thinking, oh, the world's okay, there's some problems, but anything that I experience, any suffering that I have is because it's my fault. It's like the pathology of me. It's not that our culture is degraded. It's not that there are evil influences in the world affecting me. It's all me. And you are one of the experts that can say that is just not true.
No, that's what psychiatry and psychology want you to believe. Your brain is broken. You need these toxic drugs to straighten out. Those drugs don't cure anything. They tamp down symptoms. They don't fix anything. Like Mace fixes stuff. It goes and gets those negative identities out of there, and a whole host of different psychological problems caused by trauma just vanish.
Right.
That's not the case with traditional psychotherapy, and they keep doing these. They make you take? Well, I dropped my license because I knew they would eventually go after me, so I just let it run out. So
Hmm.
it's in good stead. Otherwise, I knew they would start dirtying up, and you know, he did this and he did that. So I just let it run out. Huh. So they're going to have a hard time getting their hands on me this time. So they want you to believe that your brain is broken.
Hmm.
This biochemical imbalance crap that they came up with, which is being taught in all the universities still, even after it's been disproved years ago. They're still
Hmm.
pushing it. And it originally came out with Eli Lilly in the 70s when they came out with Prozac. They needed some explanation as to why their psych drugs worked. So they just dreamt up, this biological chemical imbalance thing. It's like, oh, well, our drugs are chemical and they somehow affect the brain, which is run with chemicals also. And so this has got to be a chemical imbalance.
Hmm.
It's not. They had no proof for it. They had no research on it. They just made it up at a clear blue sky, and there was no evidence or research into it at all. So what that does is it takes responsibility for whatever mental problem you have and puts it in the hands of psychiatrists instead of you.
Hmm.
You know, there's nothing you can do about it. Your brain is out of balance. You got to go to these highly trained professionals who what they do is scandalous. Um, when I first started working at this huge state hospital, there were 10,000 patients there when I started off. You know, I noticed something that was very odd. Even though they were kept repeating over and over again that these mental illnesses are due to a chemical imbalance, I never ever in the 7 years I was there saw a psychiatrist give any kind of test, any kind of objective test to measure what chemicals in the brains were out of balance or by how much.
Hmm.
So that looks suspicious to me. I mean, how are you going to fix a chemical imbalance in the brain if you don't know what's imbalanced and you don't have a test to test for it? So I started asking them, what's this? Where do you get a baseline? How do you know what's out of balance? And they go, oh, the pharmaceutical industries tell us, you know, for these
Hmm.
kind of illnesses, you use these kind of drugs. And, it's like letting the fox in the hen house. And later I found out they not only didn't have any tests to test the baseline, for what's out of balance, they don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be.
Hmm.
It was a total fabrication. So
Right.
here we have a mental health system that's duplistic in the first place. All right. So they're lying about the chemical imbalance in the brain. They started off with a genetic imbalance in the brain. Okay? And the geneticist said, we don't see it. We
Hmm.
don't see any genetic markers in the brain. And they came back and that upset them. They go, well, it's not just one genetic strand. It's all these bunches of them all mixed together. We're sure it's a genetic imbalance. We'll just figure it out sooner or later. You know. So they went with that. So they pulled it. They pulled any chance for people to do their own objective study or looking into it out of their hands, into the hands of geneticists and biochemists.
Hmm.
Um, the other, and so another duplicity they did was their DSM, their Bible, their psychiatric Bible of all these mental illnesses. Every single one of those is made up. There is not a single objective test for any one of the 297 psychiatric diagnoses in the DSM right now.
Right.
So the whole Western mental health system is duplistic, and it's also a failure. There's 50,000 people kill themselves every year in the United States.
And I was reading that rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide are higher now than they even were in the Great Depression in the 20s and 30s.
I don't doubt it. So here you have more psychiatrists, you got more psychologists, you got more counselors, more psychiatric drugs on the planet than ever in the history of mankind. And yet 50,000 people in the US a year are killing themselves. That's as many as died in Vietnam.
That's crazy.
Year after year after year after year.
So here's someone who's maybe struggling with depression or anxiety, low self-esteem, suicidal thoughts, and they're like, okay, it's not genetics, it's not a chemical imbalance. Well, what is it?
Well, that's where Mace comes in. It's usually a negative identity, okay, which is like a negative computer program that was installed during a trauma. Okay. So the person made a decision about their part in that trauma. And it was usually a negative decision because they don't make good decisions when they're in a state of trauma. So
Hmm.
you know how that goes. So that virus, that mind virus, then has to change. It's always operational. It's buried alive in the subconscious mind. So it's operational, but the person isn't aware of it. Okay.
Right.
So it will put negative thoughts into their mind also. Is I'm worthless, I'm no good. But that the Mace Energy Method will get rid of those things, completely
Hmm.
wipe them out. But when you come to negative entities, that's a totally different story. These are actually entities. They are energetic beings that can reason. You know, they're and they range in intelligence from very stupid to very sly,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
they interfere with the Mace method. So I had one yesterday. I was doing a Mace session with her, and the voices came out and they go, "You're not going to get rid of us. We're not leaving."
They said that to her.
They said that to her, and she told me what they had said. Other times they would actually interfere with the concentration of the individual, so they can't form an image. And if they can't form an image, Mace doesn't work for them. So they don't like Mace. They don't like people messing with it because even though in a lot of cases Mace won't get rid of the voices, and in some cases it has, but few, but it will get rid of the negative emotional trauma that these voices feed off of. They feed off of negative emotional energy.
Right. And almost everyone's traumatized in today's society. So find me
Yeah.
someone who hasn't done Mace sessions, who doesn't have these negative identities that these entities are feeding off of. And so, first of all, most people don't believe that these demonic entities are real because they've been so cartoonized in Hollywood. They've been removed from children's fiction. Churches don't talk about them anymore. And so it was really an eye opener for me when I discovered your work. And then I got attacked as I tried to share your work with the world.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
I
And
got attacked through the screen working with one kind of severe schizophrenic, right through the computer screen. You could feel it, this icky electrical energy. I'm very familiar with it. I felt it many times when I was working in the emergency rooms doing psych crisis. But through the computer screen, that took me for a surprise.
wow. Well, because they're not of this physical world, right? They're
No.
operating outside of time, space, and matter.
See, and that's what's really important because MACE is an energetic therapy. It also operates out of space, time, and matter. Okay? These entities operate outside of space, time, and matter. But you look what psychiatry and psychology are doing, especially psychiatry. I mean, they're pouring physical drugs on the brain, which is drugging the brain, but it
Mm,
doesn't have hardly any effect on these voices. It will calm the person down. They're usually major tranquilizers. The voices want them upset. One of the first patterns I discovered is they were consistently negative. They derogatory, insulting, abusive, and destructive, consistently. But
hmm.
but here's the psychiatric mafia saying, well, they're auditory hallucinations. Well, if that's so, why do they consistently stay on a negative path? Why aren't they random like all other hallucinations? Why aren't they sometimes good, sometimes neutral, sometimes bad, and everything in between? They're not. They're consistently negative. And if they are positive, it's only to trick the person and stab them in the back later.
Right. Because these demonic entities, they envy us and they hate us and they
They
want to
hate us.
destroy us.
They hate the whole human race and they do want to destroy us. They want to cause as much misery and suffering as possible. So
And
this isn't.
is that because we're created in God's image and we can experience love and beauty and goodness?
I think that's part of it. And they really hate kids. They absolutely hate kids. I had one schizophrenic who he would record off of TikTok the sound of babies laughing because his voices absolutely couldn't stand it. That was unique. I thought, well, that's interesting.
Now, is it they hate kids because they're more pure of spirit?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And then you look what's happening in the U.S. right now. The U.S. government is complicit in the biggest child trafficking operation on the planet. It's
Mhm.
sickening. These
Right.
these bozos in Washington are all paid off. Letting these kids, you know, tens of thousands of kids, come across the border and they have no idea where they are.
Right.
I've heard that they now have child auctions in the underground where they're actually selling these kids that are came across the border. This is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. I can't see how it can happen in a country like ours. But
Right. I mean, this is pure evil, and
it
my
is.
understanding is that the majority of the powers that ought not be are Satanists. They're actually Satanists, and when you get to the top, they're Luciferians, meaning that they think they're gods.
Well, they're certainly acting like it.
Hmm.
Look at what are we in, 3 wars now? Entering a fourth one? You
Yeah,
know,
that's just their blood sacrifice as well.
yeah.
It's
They
evil. It's pure evil.
well, they love the misery that it creates. I mean, the misery and the dying and the suffering and the economies collapsing. Uh, they feed on that negative emotional energy. That's their food. You know, now since they're energetic, and psychiatry is saying, okay, take these pills. Those pills are like pouring Thorazine on top of a magnetic field and expecting it to disappear.
Right.
The voices don't go anywhere. And then
No.
then the patient learns, well, if I tell the psychiatrist that I'm still hearing voices, he's going to increase my medications. And that's what happens. Or they
Hmm.
add more, or they add different ones, or they keep changing them. But there is no test. it's all subjective. It's totally subjective.
So the thing that I found so interesting about, the articles you wrote about this is you're saying you do not ignore them because they will just get louder, but you also do not resist them. What you need to do is deny them their battle.
Right.
Okay, so
You know,
how can people do that?
well, Sherry Sweeney, the co-author of our book, this guy here,
Yes, it's a fantastic book.
she was a co-author, and uh, I'd worked with her on prison reform for 10 years before she told me she was hearing voices as a child, as
Mm,
a kid. So that's how much of a stigma this stuff has. You know, it's
right.
like spooky, spooky stuff. You can feel something is wrong with these people, something is bad wrong with these people, but nobody knows what it is. You know,
Well, the thing that I've also discovered is not just, I mean, if you're at that extreme where you could be diagnosed as schizophrenic, but it seems like almost everyone is harboring these negative thoughts about themselves. And what it does, because they believe those thoughts are their own,
right.
or that they're real or they're true, everybody's walking around with tremendous amounts of shame and guilt that prevents them from speaking out.
Yeah. So again, there's two reasons for that. As one is, as a Mace has found, the negative identity that was put in there during a trauma probably years ago. It's real sad when I'm working with a 67-year-old lady that at the age of 7, her mother said something to her that made her feel like she was worthless, and she'd lived her entire life feeling
Mm,
worthless. You know, and
right.
inside of an hour, Mace is taking care of that. It's gone. You know, and
Right.
regular psychotherapy won't do that. The drugs won't do that.
So, like, given someone like that, they made a negative decision about themselves, probably when they were really young, can't even remember it. They're going around with this sense of I'm worthless. Can these demonic entities like go into your memories and I mean, they can't read your mind, right? Like only God can do that, but they can look at your behavior and see if you're acting as if you're worthless, and they can feed you more thoughts about that.
Well, they can, since they're energetic and thoughts are energetic, they can go into the person's mind and pull up every rotten thing they ever did and throw it in their faces.
Okay.
It's like, hey, you remember when you did that? Dude, what a rotten person you are. You know.
Mm,
So, um, and where these are actually thoughts that come into the person's mind, where a lot of times with Mace, there would be a sense of worthlessness. It's like a
right.
feeling, it's like a sense of worthlessness that would drive that. But it's not usually as clear as a thought coming in and saying, well, you're a worthless piece of crap.
Okay, that is a very important distinction for me because I was wondering, how do you differentiate? When I was attacked, it was thoughts. It was like, you suck, your life sucks, you're always going to
Yeah,
suck. And after a few days, I kind of was like, wait a minute, those aren't my thoughts. Where's, and then I
right,
remembered, oh no, I'm trying to bring Jerry's work to the world. And so, right. I mean, so yes, you can have a sense of my life sucks, but to actually have the thought, your
right.
life sucks. Yes.
And
Okay.
and like it's coming from somebody else. So
Yes.
the first thing that a schizophrenic needs to understand is that those thoughts that are coming in attacking him
Hmm.
are not his thoughts, because the way the mental health system is set up right now, it's like, oh, your brain is attacking itself. You're attacking yourself. And what can you do if you're attacking yourself and you don't understand why you're attacking yourself? When
Right.
you believe those thoughts belong to you, then in your opinion, you're attacking yourself for some strange reason that not even you understand. Then it's very nerve wracking.
Yes, and you and I both understand that it's not your brain that's producing thoughts anyway.
No, no, they mediate it. They're, the brain is like a radio receiver. It receives thoughts. So